The self-acceptance journey that's been disguised as your sex problem. I'm Erin, your favorite sex therapist, and today I am so excited because I am joined by ethomke, my favorite psychotherapist specializing in sexual wellness. And we are so pumped to be here today because we are going to dive into some of the struggles of sex therapy and how we get in our own way because we get in our own way all of the time. And I think one of the main things, and Erica, I'm so curious to just kick it, like jump off with this, is that a lot of times like I at least, do sex therapy with one person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be a very interesting challenge when you're only working with half of what is the dynamic when it comes to sex. So let's start there and
Yes.
talk about like how difficult that can be sometimes.
Okay. Well, we've both worked primarily with women with desire challenges, sexual dysfunction, medical issues, right? And I think that disproportionately, the person who is less looking forward to sex carries the blame,
Yeah.
you know, about why the dynamic isn't working. And we usually find, as with most issues that are interpersonal, or that end up being interpersonal, that it's like both and, right? Or yes and. So it's like, yes, one person is struggling with this thing, but also there is a co-created dynamic that contributes to this person kind of like shouldering the burden, right? And so I think that what I have seen is a lot of, I'll say, half-hearted investment in the process.
Oh, interesting.
So,
Okay.
we'll say client comes in, they're like, I'm not so interested in sex. I sometimes I experience pain, and because of that, it just makes me want to avoid it. But then I get kind of like shamed by my partner, and so like all of these things are contributing to the problem. And then when it comes down to it, I say, do you care about your sexual well-being? Like, is this something that really matters to you? Or is it something that's more affecting, you feel is more affecting your partner, and it's your partner that it matters to? And they say, if I wasn't in this relationship, I would probably not care so much. If I was on my own, I wouldn't even be thinking about my sexuality. It's not that big of a deal. And then they lose investment in the process because in their mind, they've made it about the other person, right?
Yes, and I hear that all the time, and I'm always curious when I hear that because it makes me think about, well, there's multiple reasons that somebody could say that, right? Sometimes people I think just don't really care as much about sex. And they're like, I would be kind of fine if, we just did this once a year or whatever and it'd be fine. But I also always, it makes me curious because I feel like part of that too is women's struggle with pleasure. I feel like we've been
Mm.
socialized to feel like sex is not for us, to feel like this is something we do for our partners, to feel like our desirability is a part of like our role as a woman.
Mm.
And so we do have this thought that like I do this for somebody else, but how much of that do you think is because we don't think about the fact that it can actually be fun for us too?
Yes. I had so many thoughts because I was thinking about like, yeah, and like how many things in the world that are pleasurable are we as women kind of discouraged away from? Like food is such a pleasurable thing, but we have
Yeah.
to be super controlled about it. And like, what are the other things that like guys love doing? Like video games are somehow like more marketed towards men too. And so it's just like the things that are pleasurable, our dopamine hits are like often geared towards men. Like, what are the pleasures that women are allowed? Shopping. Like
And even then
consumption.
there's judgments around it, right? And
Yes.
yeah, you're right. It's making me think about some of like the what can be really helpful outlets and other pleasurable like eating, exercising, like basic needs, but also think about the relationship that a lot of us women have with them. It's
Mm-hmm.
not pleasurable, right? Like it's this.
No. It's like self-punishing.
Yes, exactly. It's not like I'm gonna do this thing because it feels good. I'm gonna do this thing because I have to, or because I have to look a certain way, or because I have to act a certain way. And I think pleasure is a big missing piece of the conversation for a lot of women. At least in my experience, it has been. And in my own
Yeah.
experience, it was because it almost felt selfish, like
Mhm.
asking
Mhm.
for what you want and exploring what you want. Like, no, no, we're here for you. I'll just be happy with what I can get. And that sucks. Like, that's
Yes.
a crappy way to think about this shared experience.
Yes, and it's like taking a support role to something that's like an intrinsic part of your life, you know? Like the sexual energy and the sexual expression is an aspect of you. That is like your most vulnerable self. That is like the more like the beautiful creator aspect that is in your body that you were born with. And we like farm it out to other people. Like, oh, like this other person has to bring this out of me. Like this other person is like, oh, I can't express this unless this other person is present. And like, what is that about?
Well, and it makes me wonder about, and I'll use myself as an example in this, because like I've been very open with my clients and with my coaching clients about my own struggle with this. And that's part of what brought me to this field in the first place. It makes me curious, like, do I even know this part of myself? And like I went through that in the past. Like, do I even know this part of myself? Do I even have
Mm-hmm.
an understanding of what like this very primal, innate part of me is like? And
Mm-hmm.
can I share that with somebody if I don't know what that's like? Because for sure not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not
Mm-hmm.
only am I feeling like sex is a chore and that sucks and it's this obligation and I'm not having fun, now I'm not even sharing this like deeper part of
Mm-hmm.
myself or my partner. And I think that's a whole different part of this conversation. It's not just the intimacy and the sex and the connection. It's like, am I even connected with this part of me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Right. And that's why I think
That's
it's
so deep.
so, yes.
Go there.
Yeah. Because so, but that's what it comes down to. And I think that's why people then shy away from doing the work because you have to face parts of you that are scary, that are vulnerable, that are, sometimes very foreign. Um, and really being willing to like face yourself and like all of your needs for connection or validation or reassurance or like power. I think that that's a really big part of it too, is like this is a place you could be super powerful, and that's a scary feeling. Nobody wants to be responsible. Everybody's looking for the adult in the room, and you're like,
Yeah.
no, I could be that person. Anyway, so I think that really owning it and owning that this is an aspect of you and that this is sort of like a deep work that needs to be done is like more than people are really bargaining for. They want like, they want sex work to be easy.
Eric and I were just laughing before this call because we will often talk about it as it's like sex work, and we're like, oh, we shouldn't call it that. That's not what we're doing, but it's like doing work around sex, right?
Yes.
Um, and what you're talking about, I think it's hitting me so hard because it's making me think about, and I was just talking with a client this morning too, which is probably why it's on my radar, like the transition process and how there's grief in
Mm,
that, right? Like if I am somebody that has not been connected to this and I'm really struggling with it, and it's causing a lot of issues in my relationship, moving to that place where I feel more powerful, more empowered, more assertive, whatever it is,
hmm
sometimes requires the realization that I was not doing these things before. And there's a lot of grief in that. There's grief in
Oh.
not being honest about how I feel. And there's grief in lying to my partner about sex for years. And there's grief about not showing up in a way that is meaningful for me. I call it self-abandoning, right? Like not showing up in that. And that's tough. It's tough to look in the mirror and accept that, even though that's a big part of moving through that. But that transition, I think, is really hard.
hmm hmm
Like that
hmm
acknowledgement of, oh, yeah, I have not been experiencing this or showing up in this in a way that I would like.
Yes. Yeah, and but I think with that is really facing a lot of the conditioning. And I think that this is sort of why it ends up feeling like insurmountable as like a couples issue, is like all of the dynamics that get established in your relationship start really early, right? Like the first time that you trigger each other's shit is like you're gonna pussyfoot around that stuff for like the rest of your relationship for like the next 20 years. You're like, oh, I can't make this joke because this one time when he was, 25, he took it really bad. Like, so it's like weird. We get attached to these old ideas because of like, just how our brains get wired and all this stuff. But anyway, so that's why whenever you're confronting something like deep into your relationship, it feels so hard because you have like years of accumulated patterning. And that's true in your relationship with somebody else, and it's true with your relationship with yourself. It's like these are years of accumulated patterning, of avoidance, of thinking that things are one way. When if you're really just like present with the feeling, things can be maybe not that way. Maybe there's an opportunity for things to go differently. But sorry, so you were saying that you're talking with your client about, remind me again.
Now I'm thinking about something else.
Okay.
Because what you're
Okay.
trying I'm having multiple thoughts too, because this idea of well, and it might have been that same client actually that I was talking to. But part of that conversation, this idea of getting attached to old ideas was
Mhm.
we were talking about the relationship with failure or with
Mm,
and how trying to do new things, trying to do different things, like our brain likes patterns, right? It likes what's
yes.
familiar. So that's why it's so easy to fall back into the automation and do the same things over and over again. But when we try new things, like we often fail at them.
Mhm.
We often, almost always, right? Like I don't want to use all or nothing language, but we struggle. Like struggling is a part of learning anything new, whether it's a skill, whether it's a habit, whatever it is. And that can be really tough, especially in the context of a relationship when it feels high stakes, when you're trying to get out of unhelpful patterns, when you're like fighting all the time, when it's
Mm,
about something deeper and hard to talk about, like sex. Like we get attached to this idea of, well, we have to have it figured out first.
yeah.
But the failure is a part of the process. The struggle is a part of the process. And I think that's something that's really tough. And I think that's a big way we get in our own way because we think, well, I need to be the expert at this, but how does anyone become the expert? They try. It's trial and error. But I think that's a
Yes.
really difficult part of this process for people because it feels high stakes.
Mhm.
Right? That
Mhm.
like if I do this and I like can't figure it out, then what does that mean about me? And then there's all these beliefs that get attached to that and there must be something wrong with me and like it's always going to be this way when it's like no, but you need the opportunity to fail and pivot. The pivot is an
Yes.
important part of that.
Yeah, the creativity. I was talking to somebody the other day about basically, like the concept of failure, and they said, everything that I've tried, I've failed. And I feel like that's such a it's a limiting belief because that means that you have what? Like the godlike perspective of like what achievement is. Like so if I and so I reframed it like, okay, if I'm setting out to make cookies, but the batter, I follow the recipe, whatever, people told me this is how you're supposed to do it, so I did it, but all that came out was like this big blob. Oh, okay, so you made a fucking cake. Okay, you failed at cookies, but it's something else. Like change your perspective and it's a victory, you
Yes.
know?
Yes.
So it's like because we are placing an expectation on it, we are placing our very limited understanding of what it's supposed to look like, we deem it a failure because it didn't meet our expectations.
That is so powerful. This idea of changing perspective, I think, is so powerful. Because also, who doesn't love a cookie cake? They're the best. I prefer them to regular
Yes.
cookies, right? But it's true. Like our perspective really makes or breaks things. Like it, because the thing that we're looking at is the thing that we're looking at, right? That like if we
Mm.
think about those cookies, like the cookie, like, nobody gives the cookies don't matter, right? Like who gives a shit about the cookies? It's not about the cookies. It's about the like value that we
Mm.
attach to it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, and of course, like when things are stressful, they don't often feel like opportunities, but when they are, when we can look at them through this lens of what is this teaching me? What do I want to try differently? And what did I do last time that was not helpful? Or what am I doing this time that's not helpful? Right? Like the only way to
Mm.
learn from that is to get curious. And we often go to that judgmental place
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because also, and I think it comes from a place where it's trying to be helpful, right? Because like who loves
Yeah.
struggling? Nobody, right? So we want to like work efficiently and get to
Yes.
that like helpful place more often. But I think the perspective goes a long way because it makes me think about the whole like whatever you look for, you'll see type thing. So if you see it as a setback, if you see it as like just a failure without any sort of teaching opportunity, if you see it as a judgment about who you are as a person, that's what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think can be a really slippery slope then when it comes to trying to make it trying again and continuing to
Mm-hmm.
invest in this. And it's even harder when we think about the other people involved in the relationship, like, because I can't control what you do, right? So if I tried to assert myself in a different way and it didn't go well, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to put myself out there again in that same way.
Yes. Yeah. So it takes a certain amount of like receptivity for growth.
Mm,
Because if you get attached to one outcome, then you're limiting the options.
mhm,
And I think that happens in so many different ways. Like we miss our partner's bids for connection because, well, you didn't connect the way that I was expecting you to connect. So, it was lost on me. Oh, you took the trash out when I really wanted you to mow the lawn, like to make it super simple. But
mhm.
um but then it's also the same thing within ourselves. Like, oh, well, I'm not really spontaneously wanting to have sex, but I'm totally neglecting the part where once I do get in that headspace, I orgasm more easily than I used to. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
changing our barometer, like being more receptive to just things being different can alter how we perceive growth, right? But I think that what else are we seeing? We're seeing not just this limited perspective, or I guess like maybe because of this limited perspective, we're seeing people like not so invested in doing the work, right? Like we are like, oh, hey, go home and I don't know what, pay attention to the cues in your environment that make you interested or like make you a little bit more curious about sex. And do they do it?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
But like,
Yeah.
so I have this like, I mean, I was like going on this whole rant about it that, you know, when your priest tells you to do the work, you take it a lot more seriously.
Mm.
You
Or
trust the
like your
priest.
doctor, or like,
Yes.
hmm
Yeah, because there's a sacredness from the priest. Because, like, that type of work, that sort of like self work, the spiritual work that your priest is guiding you through has more clout than your mental emotional journey with your therapist. It's the same thing.
mm
It's still
hmm
self work. It's still a spiritual evolution. You're still like, dismantling the karmic blocks or like intergenerational trauma is as we reframe it. Um, that is part of a spiritual evolution. But because we don't assign the same kind of like sanctity to the therapist's office as we do like church, people don't take the work as seriously.
That's so, yeah. And I feel like this doctor exam, like it's really resonating me too. Like, will people go to the doctor and they take that seriously in their physical health? And the doctor says, well, you need to start exercising to lower your blood pressure. And they're like, okay. I mean, not everybody, I guess, but they're like, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to take my blood pressure pills every day. Right. And there's a different level of maybe seriousness is not the right word, but that's what's coming up for me. And I wonder if it's because this, like, mental and emotional and I mean, especially around sex, because I think in some
Mm.
ways, like, there's still this deservingness piece of the conversation, right? That, like, everything else has to be super set in my life for me to even explore something that should just be fun and pleasurable, but
Mm.
I think you're right. I think the buy-in is really important,
Mm. Mhm.
because what it's making me think about is at the end of the day, like, what happens in therapy or, like, the most helpful part of therapy is what happens outside of the office.
Mm.
Like, if I'm seeing a client, like, I'm seeing for 1 hour a week, like, there's a lot.
Yep.
I'm not gonna do that mental math here in front of you, but, like, there's many other hours in the week, right?
So many.
that you are doing the same things that you were in the past, or you're engaging in those automations, or maybe you're trying the new things, right? That like I
Hmm.
always say to my clients, it's a 90-10, right? Like 90% of my value is what you do outside of this.
Yeah.
But also like there is that buy-in that's important, that like this is a lot deeper sometimes than just talking about our feelings. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. Like this deeper, like self-work as a spiritual process. Like, what are your thoughts when you think about that? Like this deeper growth, however you want to think about it.
Right. So lots of things. So right. So I think that going back to what you were saying and the whole like buy-in, the whole way that we get in our own ways in therapy is because of how we conceptualize this process,
Mm.
right? And so it comes back to like how significant is it to look at my sexuality? Okay, well, if I'm only looking at it as like the actual act of sex, like, okay, that doesn't really seem that significant. If I think about it in the context of my relationship, it seems a little bit more significant because it's affecting somebody else's happiness, whether or not I engage in this behavior. Okay, so it's like we're assigning like layers of meaning, but then when we bring it back to like, this is an aspect of myself that I don't have any kind of connection to. And if you reframe it as like, oh, here's an aspect of myself, like my relationship with exercise. Well, that's going to become a lot more important to me as I age because it's going to affect my physical functioning and my well-being and my long-term health. Like, so we assign more and more value to certain things, like depending on our life circumstances, right? But all of this, like, so I'm giving you these different kind of contexts to understand that it all comes back to us and our experience in this life. And so when we work on confronting our limitations and either accepting them or deciding to shift them, um, that's that's a part of our relationship to something beyond us, I think. And so in terms of that, I sort of see it as like a spiritual growth, right? Like it's not just self-work, it's how I feel more connected to this life. If I am so bogged down by limitations, by stories that prevent me from enjoying life, from feeling pleasure, from connecting with other people, to feeling connected to the earth, to a higher power, if you believe in that, like, what's the point of being alive? If you're going to let all these stories like close you down, you're not living.
Yeah, it's like quality of life,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Like what kind, yeah, like, and this is like resonated with me on such a deep, like on such a deep level, I can't even really verbalize it in this moment, but like, yeah, yeah, like do it. Actually, it makes me think about, because with so many of my clients, we talk about the to-do list because I work with like very like
Yeah.
productive, driven, like organized women, right? Who live and die by their to-do list. And I can fully relate to that. But then I think about it and I'm like, yes, the structure is helpful and
Mm.
comforting in some ways. But the goal of life is not to check things off the to-do list. Like what happens if that to-do list is done? What is that like? Where do I go with my life then, right? Like this idea of living your life for living, for
Mm.
connection, for enjoyment is really resonating with me because I think a lot of times we just get stuck going through the motions.
Mm-hmm.
Like getting through one day to get to the next and getting through this week so that we can get to the weekend, right? And like getting through spring so that we can get to summer and
Mm-hmm.
we're
Mm-hmm.
really here and present and connecting in the way that we could be.
Yes.
And then that comes back to the grief of recognizing that we're not living the life in the way that we could. And I think that's tough. I think a lot of
Yes.
times it feels out of control, where it's like, well, I have kids and like I have work and I have all of
Mm-hmm.
these responsibilities. And, us women tend to be people pleasers. There's all of these things that we have to think about and do.
Mm-hmm.
We are last on our own lists. And what does that mean? Like what are we giving to anybody then?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm,
I know. And when I recently I've been coming back to like the oxygen mask rule, like
mm,
always. see to yourself first and not in, a self-important way, but in a pragmatic way. Like, if your cup is empty, you cannot pour into anyone else's. And so I it's so silly, but when my kid asks for a drink of water, I'm like, I'm gonna drink a I'm gonna drink water first because you know what she's gonna do? She's gonna take it and she's gonna splash the whole thing on herself, and there's not gonna be any water
Gonna be
left.
any other water left for you.
No. And so counting on there being something left over for me at the end is not a fair or realistic expectation a lot of the time. So martyring yourself for what? Like for some like expected payoff, like it's never going to work out, people. So, all of it comes back to like healthy self-prioritization.
Yeah, because we don't give anybody our best when we're not feeling our best. And I always talk
No.
about with my clients, I talk about the difference between selfish and self-focused. Because I think we think
Yeah.
putting ourselves first is selfish. We don't want to be
Hmm.
selfish. We were all taught to be like good little girls that don't take up a lot of space and are quiet and are nice and, like
Yeah.
are prim and proper and all of those stupid messages that we took in. But being self-focused is a good thing. Like we need to be. If I'm giving anybody in this life my best, like you best believe I'm getting 8 hours of sleep, I'm eating well, I'm exercising, I'm spending time outside because if I'm not, I'm miserable.
Hmm.
I'm just a cranky bitch who's mean to everybody and like super impatient and I can't focus on anything. And then I'm shit at everything, like in my relationship, in my work. Like that's not fair to any of the people that I spend time with. Like, yes, I am not negating my responsibilities and being selfish.
Hmm.
Being self-focused is the most important thing, or else what? First off, what kind of life am I living? Like you were saying, what's my quality of life? But what do I have left in the tank to give to anybody else?
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think that's something a lot of women struggle with.
Yes. And like lately, I think more and more in terms of connection. And like that is the thing that gives us purpose and meaning ultimately, is like how we are able to connect with others and then see our influence on other people and derive meaning from that. Um, and so if you think about it if you think about self focus in that way, like, okay, I'm not going to get so bogged down in my routine of like, well, I have to get my run in or else, I'll be whatever, if that's like at the expense of being able to connect with a friend in need, right? So it's sort of like, I think in some ways it's like values, being able to attend and be aware first of what you need, but also being able to bring that um like bring that into the perspective of connection. Like, how is this influencing my ability to connect with people? Is it getting in my way of connecting with other people because I'm so focused on, you know, my running schedule, my whatever, could like adhering to my to-do list than I am in connecting with others? Or is seeing to my needs, putting on my oxygen mask, enabling me to better connect with other people? Like maybe that's just the perspective shift that helps us identify selfishness with self-focus. Does that make sense?
Well, and I love that you're saying this because what it's making me think about, like with this perspective shift, is because sometimes it is hard to do things for ourselves. Sometimes to like get our foot in the door, we have to feel like it's also benefiting other people. But what this is making me think about is like how when we take care of ourselves, we can pull other people up with us. Like
Yeah.
literally, as you were talking about that, what I was imagining is like, because we've all been in those experiences where we're at a bar, at a party, whatever it is, and somebody walks into the room and they just drain the life of that party. Or that friend that you're like, every time I see them, it's going to be a whole thing. And they're like always negative and it's bad vibes all around. But on the flip side, we all know what it's like to be in the room and somebody just lights that up. And
Mm-hmm.
they're always fun to be around.
Mm-hmm.
They can just change the vibe of that setting and that party and all that kind of stuff, right? Like if we kind of boil this down, those are the realities that we're talking about. Am I a drain and now that's the energy that I'm giving to everybody and I'm pulling everybody down with me?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I get to pull everybody up? and we all
Huh?
elevate each other. And I think that can be a helpful way to think about it too. Like, yeah, you want to be that person that walks in and lights up the room. That feels good, but also
Uh-huh.
everybody else gets to benefit from that then.
Yes.
The ripple.
Yes. It is the ripple effect. And like I think that that's so much that's like an indicator I think also of doing the work. When you are draining other people is because you're so bogged down by nonsense stories. You know, there's probably some sort of like victim identity in there that's like, I need other people's energy to make me feel worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not helping anybody. So when we get to that place of self-empowerment, of, having had our oxygen mask on, we're able to be that light for other people. We've done enough self work, spiritual work, that we can share energy and not feel the need to like consume all of it.
Well, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this because what this is making me think about too is like shifting this perspective, shifting our realities, is that we come up against those like garbage beliefs that we have in our head that
Mm.
often we're taught to us. Like we're not babies coming out of the womb being like, I think I'm too fat. Like that shit was taught to us. And I read, it had been on my bookshelf forever, and I finally got around to reading You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a great book. I highly recommend it. Short little chapters. It's an easy read. But it's like the whole book essentially is this perspective about like whatever you want to make your life, you can.
Hmm.
It's that we get in our own ways with these limiting beliefs and our limiting beliefs about our relationship and money and job and career and family and whatever it is, right? Like we have these, here's what I will, here's the bare minimum that we often
Mm.
like go after and then we stay at. And then there are these big dreams that a lot of people never go after because they think they can't.
Yeah.
And I feel like reading that really resonated with me because I deal with my own blocks and things where like I feel like I'm getting in my own way. And I'm like, oh my God, is it me? Like she's saying I can have all these things. And reading it, I'm like, yeah, I could feel the thoughts coming up that I'm like, I can't, I'll never, like I'm not good enough. And I'm like, where does this shit come from? Like those are not my actual thoughts. Like
Mm.
I want to be successful and I want to help people and I want to engage in my work and in my relationships in a meaningful way. Like where is this shit coming from that is stopping me from doing that? And I think that's just like what I'm thinking about in talking about this. That like, I think
Mm.
we can accomplish a lot more than we realize, but we get in our own ways because we say, I can't, I'll never,
Hmm.
I won't.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I I think that everybody needs to become aware of not just what's lighting you up and what's giving you energy, but also what are the things that become a drain because, obviously social media is a huge one, but then we do have a lot of cultural messaging that's very disempowering. Um, even just in the context of sex, like our public school education didn't do us any favors in helping us feel empowered, sexual beings. Um,
Even a little. Not even, I feel like that's putting it very kindly. Like, they didn't teach us shit, especially for women. Like, we learned about puberty and that's about it. And that alone was terrifying. I'm like, okay, so what I learned is that my body does terrifying things, while boys are going to learn about erections and it's super funny and it's great. I'm like, come on.
Yeah, they already know about erections.
No.
Um, yeah, I know, right? And just the lack of education is horrific. But so all of that to say, like being aware of like where these negative sources come from, um, so that you can kind of reject that. You can let that energy go when you're like, oh, here's this person that never has anything positive to say when I share good news. Like, and then I leave the situation feeling like, oh man, I guess that won't work out. Like, all right, change how you interact with that person. Don't share your positive news. You don't have to like cut them out of your life, but just realize that this is the drain, you know? And then the same thing with that's like the outer world, right? We have like our community, our culture that's doing one thing, and then we have like an inner sphere that's like our personal relationships, the people in our lives who are going to be commenting or whatever. And then we have our even closer sphere, our partner or our families, and like what's happening in that exchange. But then there's us. Then there's our limiting beliefs and our, you know, yeah, lack of chutzpah. I don't know.
Well, and I was on Monday, such as yesterday? The other day, we'll say the other day, I was talking with a client and we were talking about this idea of like, and I'm thinking about it because you're talking about like sharing good news, like celebrating her success, celebrating herself and her successes and that kind of stuff, and how she struggles with that. So it's like her friends, her
Oh,
family, her husband, all super supportive, great relationships,
huh.
but it starts with her. She's like, I don't want to put anybody out. Like, I don't want to make a big thing. I don't want to like inconvenience people.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like even her birthday, she's like, and it's fine. I don't need to do anything. And I'm like, that's the one day that tends to be easier for us, right? Like that's the one day that's about you. But I think you're
Yes.
right. We've taken in these messages about what we share, what we don't, what's acceptable or not. And especially for women, I think there's this idea of sharing successes, enjoying your sex life, being an advocate for pleasure, like that we police and we're like, whoa.
Mhm. Mhm.
If you're doing like, what do you mean you're not super stressed? You're not working as hard as the rest of us. What do you mean you enjoy sex? Like that's like there's the message that's slutty. That means you're a hoe. That means that you're whatever it is, right? Like we have these weird messages that
Yes.
come from the ether, I guess, right? Like from our society that
Mhm.
affect how we even show up in that in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's these beliefs that like, well, if I enjoy sex, that means I'm a slut. But
Mhm.
isn't that the goal at the same time? Like, but that keeps us stuck, right? Like, how do I
Yeah.
then enjoy this and explore it if my belief is that that is a negative thing?
Mm.
Mm.
Mhm. Mhm.
That social messaging, I think it's strong, and I think it shows up in a lot of ways.
Yes. Definitely. And, I think that's one of the big things that we end up doing, right? Is a lot of like dismantling those stories in sex therapy because those are the part of the limiting beliefs that hold people back from enjoyment or self-exploration.
Yes. And I feel like we've come full circle here. I think that's part of what is really difficult when you're only working with one half of the couple.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Because like I have a lot of female clients who are married, they have husbands, and like I'll be working with her and we're working around these limiting beliefs and exploring this stuff and
Mhm.
grounding in this stuff. And then she'll go home and have these conversations with her husband who doesn't have the same knowledge and awareness now and has his own limiting beliefs. And then she comes
Yeah.
back and it's back to square one, right? Like and it's
Mhm.
not to hate on these husbands. Like I
Yeah.
think they were taught the same unhelpful stuff that we are, but especially with sex drive. Like I'll use that as a classic example. Like they were not taught about the different types of sex drive and how this works differently for men and women. Like the women I talk to don't even know this. So their husbands for sure don't know this, right? But then they unknowingly reinforce this idea that there's something wrong with her.
Mhm.
That like she just needs to fix this problem. And so I'll step back and I'll wait. And it's usually coming from a helpful place. I don't want her to feel pressured. I don't know how to help. So like I'm just gonna take a step back. But now she's alone in it. Now
Mhm.
she feels even more like it's her problem to fix when sex is a co-created experience. And now it's just a dynamic that's playing off of each other that's getting them even more stuck.
Yes.
Right? So it's like both of the beliefs come in to this at the
Mhm.
same time and they can really wreak havoc. It can really make it hard to change that dynamic, especially if one is trying to shift and the other one is like pulling back unconsciously, but like pulling back because he's like, well, I don't think I'm part of the problem. Like I don't,
Mhm.
but it's not either person that's the problem. It's the dynamic that's the problem.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. Very well said. Right, because the context can change everything. If husband is suddenly like, yes, like, what am I doing to contribute to your shutdown? Or like, how am I unconsciously shutting you down? Even. Um, that changes the whole thing. Especially if he's like curious when she comes back. He's like, how did therapy go? Like what can we do? Where how can I help? That's very different than like, hey, are you fixed yet?
Or even not even having the conversation.
Yes, this isn't going as fast as I thought it would.
Yes, exactly. And I'm going to get on my soapbox here for a minute because I'm gonna rant about it because I can feel it coming. But it's like it frustrates me for both of them because I can't tell you how many conversations I have had with women where we're talking about, okay, so what have you tried? Like What results have you gotten? Like, why are you stuck? Like, right, we identify the barriers, we figure out what they need to move forward. It's like, okay, this is what I think would be helpful. Maybe we work together for sex therapy. Maybe you join my signature program, whatever it is. Because at the end of the day, we do need professional help with this. It's like if you had knee pain, you wouldn't just like ignore it until you couldn't walk. You go to the doctor. You get some recommendations and you get some exercises that you can't just Google, right? It's the same type thing, but we think about it differently. But we're talking about it, and this woman is like, it's been going on for years, and I'm really struggling, and it's taking a huge toll on our relationship. And I know it's important to him, and he's feeling rejected, unloved. And we're like, okay, yeah. So we need to do something different, right? Like, let's get you some strategies, let's get you some tools. She goes and she talks to her husband, and she comes back and she says he said no. And it's so frustrating to be on the other side of that because, first off, it breaks my heart that they're going to continue to struggle with this.
Mhm.
But also, it's this idea of him not realizing that they need different strategies, him not realizing that she needs help, that they need help, because there's this idea that they should just be able to do this on their own. It should just be this natural, easy, spontaneous thing. And that is not how it works. So it's frustrating that, like, the very basis people investing in time,
Mhm.
energy, effort, whatever it is,
Mhm.
to fix this, they don't do originally because they feel like it should just happen.
Yes.
And it's really because I'm like, you don't have to struggle like this, but you do need to do something different. I always use the example of vacation, right? Like, because nothing just happens in our relationships, right? It all takes effort. I don't just happen to find myself on vacation. I have to
Yeah.
book time off and I have to book the flights and I have to budget, right? Like, I have to do these things, even for something that's enjoyable. So, like, why is sex any different? I don't just find myself being a good communicator. I've like tried and I
Yes.
failed and we fought about it and then we found new strategies. But for some reason, sex is in this different box for people. But I think it's really hard to see women struggling and wanting to fix this and then not having that buy-in from their partners because they just don't know.
Yeah. Yes. And, maybe it didn't used to be this way. I mean, I think that all of the things that our capitalism, that our culture has developed to pull us out of our bodies and out of authenticity and like out of touch with ourselves are the things that have created this problem. Like, of course, we didn't need sex therapists 200 years ago. Like, there was no screens. Like, there was so much more authentic connecting with each other because there weren't as many distractions. You didn't have to hustle to live. I mean, maybe you had to like, worry about the harvest, but whatever. Like, we're trading problems here. But because we don't have to worry about the harvest now, we have to worry about connecting with other people and connecting with ourselves. And because of that, we've lost touch with easy sexuality. Like, maybe it was never easy, maybe that's like glorifying the past, but obviously this position emerged. We haven't had sex guides for hundreds of years. Like, this emerged as people became distracted and out of touch. So, yeah, so thinking about that is like, okay, we're out of touch. That's all it is. It doesn't have to be this big scary thing that we avoid. I think that people start to think like, if we acknowledge this as a problem, then it means that there's a problem in our marriage. It means that there's something defective about us, and there's like all kinds of limiting beliefs attached to it.
Exactly. And it's so frustrating because I know that the change process is usually we have to like hit the breaking point. We have to have that like no more experience, right? The
Hmm.
reality is that shifting this stuff is way easier the earlier we intervene because it's not tied to the identity yet.
Yeah.
Not tied to my beliefs about myself. If it's just been going on for a couple of months or if we're just kind of out of
Mm.
rhythm or we're just out of sync, by the time people come to see me, it's been 10 years.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And like they can't even talk about sex anymore. It's like that one thing in their relationship. And they'll say, well, we have a good relationship. Sex is
But
one thing. Right?
yeah, I
And
love that. We have a
intimacy
good
is a
relationship, but
exactly. And I'm like, well, that's good because that means that we maybe have some communication skills and like you two are still spending time together. You're not like sleeping in different bedrooms yet, right? Like that kind of stuff. But intimacy is a pillar of relationships because when we
yeah.
talk about like fixing one's sex life, it's not just about the sex.
Hmm.
But the fact that over time, the expectation means you pull away and you avoid touch and you avoid affection because you're tired of saying no all the time and you don't want to be the bad guy. And so now there's so much, now you're not even, there's no connection.
Yes.
right? Like sex is like the top, if we're like the iceberg, sex is like the tip of the iceberg. There's all of this other shit going on under the
That's right.
surface that really
Yes.
is important for like that deeper connection.
Yes. And I think to that point, it's like I think that a lot of male partners prioritize sex because that is their most obvious connection method.
Mhm.
You know, they're like, "Oh, I need sex to feel connected." Like, "Okay. Well, that's also an immature perspective." Like, yes, it's super important, but there's also these other modes of connecting, like emotional connecting, mental connecting, having like conversations and things like that. Sharing physical space, like an energy connecting,
Mm,
um, that contribute to overall relationship well-being, and they all need to be present. Otherwise, the relationship is not well. And so I think it's funny when people are like, no, our relationship is great. It's just sex. And it's like, okay, but are you connecting mentally and emotionally and like through quality time? Actually, no. So I think that sex is sort of like the smoke screen for a lot of stuff,
mm,
a lot of the time. Um, and it kind of like waffles in its prioritization, right? Like how bad does it have to be before both partners value addressing it?
mhm, mhm.
So anyway, I think that going back sort of like returning to our overall theme about like how we conceptualize the problem is always huge. Taking into consideration cultural messaging, also huge. But then also really like getting in touch with ourselves and confronting ourself and like this is an aspect of us, of like my identity or like my being that's here, that's wounded, that's not being witnessed. And like being able to actually face that is going to change your whole relationship.
And I think that's such a great way to put it. Like, sex is this smokescreen for all these other things, but also means that when you address and give TLC to all of these other things, it boosts things. It brings you closer. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes people hyper focus in on one aspect of their relationship when the reality is that all of these other things, it's none of it exists in a vacuum. All these
Yes.
other things that you do affect it. And I think you put it much more eloquently than I am now. I'm just processing my thoughts, but I think that's a really important point. That it's never just one thing. And also, it is important to nurture these other areas of the relationship, especially
Mm-hmm.
for women and how their sex drive works, right? Like from a biological
Yes.
perspective, connection, emotional connection, emotional safety, like physical safety, right? That kind of stuff is really important
Mm-hmm.
from like
Mm-hmm.
a sex drive stimulating perspective.
Yes.
Oh, I feel like we could talk about this stuff for days and days. I feel like even today, I'm like, we could have talked about one of these topics for hours. So we should definitely schedule another one and dive deeper into this. Any final thoughts? Anything else that that's come up for you that you're like, you know what, this is so interesting?
No, I think that I accidentally just nutshelled it.
You did a really great job, actually. I
Thanks.
loved it. I loved it. But this was so fun. I think these conversations are so important because at the end of the day, like sex is a hard thing for people to talk about. And it's not
Yes.
because it's wrong and dirty. It's because we don't do it. Right? The belief is that it's
Yes.
taboo and
Mm-hmm.
it's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's just because we don't do it. So we don't have the
Yes.
words and we don't know what to say. And then when it becomes a fight because somebody feels rejected or judged or unloved, right? Like now we can't talk about it. So I think just having these conversations openly about the ways that we get in our own way and the
Mm-hmm.
ways that these barriers come up in relationships with wanting to
Mm-hmm.
fix the problem, but then not wanting to take the steps to fix the problem. It's just really important.
Yes.
And hopefully the people listening are getting some insights into how it's okay if you feel stuck. It's okay, like if your partner is not on board right now. And there are reasons or there are ways to go about this
Mm-hmm.
that make it easier, right? And like the barriers are a part of the process, but that is often why it is so helpful to talk to somebody because we need ways to get outside of our own heads and challenge these beliefs. Because
That's
left to
right.
our own devices, it's just an echo chamber in there, and that's not always super helpful.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think like really embracing that if I want to fix any of these outer problems that I'm perceiving, I have to address the inner problems, like really embrace myself. Your road becomes much smoother.
Yeah. Most important relationship we have, right? One we have with
That's right.
ourselves.
Exactly.
Mhm. Oh, I love it. This was so fun, Erica. Thank you, as always, for
Thank
joining
you.
me. If you're listening and this episode hit home for you, let us know. Shoot me a message, shoot Erica a message. All the contact information is here for you, or share this with somebody that you think needs to hear it. So at the end of
Mm,
the day, the more we talk about this, the more we can normalize it, the more we can do about it. So don't be
exactly.
afraid to talk about sex. It's only scary because we don't do it. So we hope this was helpful, and we will see you next time. Bye.